at magpabakuna na ng ating booster shots para extra protection ang meron tayo. Vaccine efficacy wanes over time. Ibig sabihin, humihina po ang bisa ng ating mga bakuna paglipas ng panahon. Kaya naman, magpa-booster to stay protected and be extra protected from the now circulating and possible variants in the future.
That was Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere making the case yet again as to why Filipinos need to get their booster shots. This as a case of the more transmissible Omicron XE has been reported in Thailand. The DOH says all vaccines should be effective against the new variant.
So far, only 12 million Filipinos have had their booster shots, with some 46 million eligible recipients still yet to get their additional dose. Concerns now shift to the possibility of vaccine wastage, with some reporting that as much as 27 million doses are nearing expiration. Time for today's biggest headlines. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. As health officials make a strong push for booster vaccination, on the ground, there's rarely any lines in some vaccination centers.
This as some eligible vaccinees opted to skip booster doses, arguing that other than possible side effects, it's not really required by government. Mon Gualvez with The Big Story.
Barangay Chairman Jolly has completed 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. After getting his second dose in August, he no longer plans to get the booster dose.
Nakadalawa na naman po. Siguro sapat na yun. Yung booster shot, hindi naman po nire-required ng government.
Despite this, Cap Jolly still encourages his constituents to take the booster. But if they chose not to, he won't consider it a problem. Senior citizen Jojo also shares the same sentiment. Jojo said he's scared of the possible side effects from the booster shot.
Dapat choice na lang yun. Kung gusto mo pa magpa-booster, pa-booster ka. Diba? Kung kaya mo, nasa sa'yo yun. Katawan mo naman yan eh. Tapos senior ka pa.
Jolly and Jojo are among the 46.8 million Filipinos who still haven't had their booster dose. This is 70% of the 66 million who have gotten their primary doses. The DOH insists it's important to get the booster.
Vaccine efficacy wanes over time. Ibig sabihin, humihina po ang bisa ng ating mga bakuna paglipas ng panahon. Kaya naman, magpa-booster to stay protected.
While most vaccines in this health center in Manila still have a year before they expire, some are nearing expiration. The National Task Force Against COVID-19 says only 2% of the country's procured vaccines went to waste. But the task force is doing all they can to save the vaccines that are nearing expiry.
Pag meron kang malapit na sa shelf life, nire-request namin for extension and tinitingnan nila if inalagaan mo yung vaccine, nalagay sa cold storage, walang problema during its storage, tayo ay pwedeng magpa-extend sa manufacturer ng additional 30 days.
To address this, vaccine expert panel member Dr. Ronjin Solante agrees to set an expiration date on vaccination cards to encourage the public to get their boosters. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
What are the reasons for the low vaccination rates? That big question and more with Dr. Ted Herbosa, Medical Advisor of the National Task Force Against COVID-19. Good evening, Dr. Herbosa. Welcome again to The Big Story.
Good evening, Robbie, and thank you for having me at the Big Story.
Dr. Herbosa, any ideas? What can we do? We were doing so well with the first 2 shots. What is behind this hesitancy behind booster shots?
Well, I heard your feature, and I heard a person specifically say they're happy with the 2 doses, no? Because I think that's all the establishments ask for, a full vaccination card. So it's very important that people understand that the antibodies wane. For example, I myself, after my 2 doses and after several months, about 3 months, I was tested in the hospital and my antibody levels, my neutralizing antibodies was only 50. And that's low. And after my booster dose, just a week ago, I had it tested and it raised up to 200 plus. So definitely, over time, the neutralizing antibodies induced by the vaccines wane, and the booster will really help protect you even longer and even better. So I think there's a misconception that the 2 doses are enough. People should understand they should get a booster just like many other vaccines where we also give booster shots.
Yes, and a lot of people also feel that, nakakaikot naman ako, nakakagala naman ako, nakakapasok naman ako kung saan-saan. Pero nabanggit din po doon sa feature kanina, how about putting an expiration date on the VaxCert, for example? Might that work?
That might work, that might induce them, but I think what's important is to convince people that while our risks are low, there is always the possibility of these new variants coming into the country and again creating havoc like it did in January. So it's very important that we boost our immunity so that if that comes, I mean, we are protected from hospitalization and death and complications of the new variants that come in. So this is actually the time we should be getting our boosters. But apparently, because of the low alert level and the low risk, low numbers of cases, people have become overconfident and complacent. So we're convincing them, the Department of Health, the National Task Force, is trying to convince everyone to get their booster shots.
Okay, in the meantime, what happens to all of that supply in case nga mag-expire?
Well, all these vaccines have been distributed all over the country. In fact, we can't say there's really that amount that's expiring because we don't know what have been utilized and given by the different regions and local governments. So in fact, we're doing what's called a wall-to-wall inventory of what is left and their true expiry date, so we will know what is at hand. Also, we are trying to, as our vaccination administration has slowed down, some of our vaccines have been decided to be donated to our nearby neighbors like Myanmar and Papua New Guinea, who are having problems trying to get vaccines or procure vaccines. So we will give them some of the vaccines that we have so that we can help them attain a certain level of immunity.
Okay, Dr. Herbosa, maraming salamat po. That was Dr. Ted Herbosa, Medical Advisor to the National Task Force against COVID-19. As the Holy Week draws near, the Health Department is advising against certain practices to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Gretch, what may or may you not do during Holy Week?
Robbie, for one thing, you can't kiss the crucifix. DOH Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere has advised against some Holy Week practices like the pahalik and the crucifixion. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere says devotees should refrain from kissing images of Christ because doing so could transmit the COVID-19 virus, which spreads through droplets. The DOH also advises against doing a reenactment of the crucifixion of Christ as this can lead to other infections.
Meron naman po tayo mga iba pang bagay o ways kung paano po tayo makakapag-show ng ating devotions sa atin pong mga pinupuntahang mga simbahan. Pero sana po itong practice na to maiwasan para hindi na po tayo magkaroon ng pagtaas ng kaso kung sakasakali.
Meanwhile, these are the other big stories tonight. No unity talk from their end. The camp of Manila Mayor Isko Moreno thumbs down prospects of a united opposition against Marcos Jr. This as a volunteer group withdraws support for Moreno. Meanwhile, a man who allegedly posted online threats against Marcos Jr. has been arrested, but his family claims that it's a case of mistaken identity. And UE Red Warriors head coach Jack Santiago was temporarily suspended by the UAAP after supposedly asking his players to harm UP's Richie Rivero. These big stories after the break. his presidential candidacy, and this has been confirmed by his campaign manager Lito Banayo, even as one volunteer group switched to a rival side.
Moreno is also dousing hopes of a unity talk among bets who are behind presidential frontrunner Ferdinand Marcos Jr. JC Cosico has this report.
It seems Manila Mayor Isko Moreno himself is thumbing down hopes of a unity talk among presidential bets to oppose frontrunner Ferdinand Marcos Jr. During the inauguration of the Binondo Intramuros Bridge, Moreno said he would rather support a united effort to address the country's problems.
Ang tunay nating kaaway ay yung hirap na dinaranas ng tao. Kasi yun ang purpose ng paglaban ko maging alternatibo ng taong bayan.
But Moreno refused to respond to Ikaw Muna Pilipinas' decision to shift its support to Vice President Leni Robredo. For them, Robredo has the best chance of defeating Marcos Jr. based on surveys. But Moreno's campaign manager Lito Banayo said surveys cannot be trusted. Banayo also maintained that many other groups in the region are standing by Moreno's candidacy.
How reliable are surveys in a very toxic environment such as what we have, where paid trolls proliferate? Lahat ng surveys na nakikita natin ay mga either mid-February or first week of March, pero hindi pa nakaka-capture mga events like yung 203 billion peso tax estate tax claim against Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
The inauguration of the Binondo Intramuros Bridge also led to another encounter between Moreno and President Rodrigo Duterte. The two, however, did not get the chance to talk. But as for Moreno, he remains hopeful that he will get the president's endorsement as he needs all the votes he can get.
I'm hoping that as a voter, si Pangulong Duterte botante pa rin. I don't know sino yung boboto niya. At kailangan ko talaga ng lahat ng tulong.
For News 5, JC Cosico, We Are One News.
Presidential aspirant Vice President Leni Robredo and her slate are in Rizal today for a grand campaign rally. For more details, we have mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro reporting live from Antipolo, Rizal. Jacob, kamusta dyan?
Robbie, although it rained hard the whole day during Vice President Leni Robredo's campaign in Rizal, no activity was canceled. Political analysts believe that if Robredo wants to increase her chances in winning the top seat, she needs to convert more votes in Calabarzon, which includes Rizal. Recall that Robredo lost here to Ferdinand Marcos Jr. during the 2016 elections. The ruling Llanares political clan of the province is also endorsing Marcos Jr. for this year's polls. A provincial board member, however, did endorse Robredo. Also earlier today, the Vice President had a covenant signing with the One Sumbubungan Indigenous Peoples Coalition. She promised that she will amplify the voices of the IPs more if she gets elected.
At sisiguraduhin namin na yung lahat na proteksyon sa inyo nasa batas, nasa ilalim ng batas, ay nasusunod. Yung pangako po namin, hindi lang konsultasyon, pero lahat na bahagi ng usapin, patungkol sa kahit anong bagay na maaapektuhan kayo.
Robbie, right now, Robredo is holding her grand rally here in Antipolo City, where a crowd turnout is expected. There will also be celebrity performances. Robbie?
Maraming salamat, Jacob. That was mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro reporting live from Antipolo.
For the big story in sports, after 2 long years, fans are finally back in the stands to witness UAAP Season 84 men's basketball action. The league opened the gates of the Mall of Asia Arena for fully vaccinated individuals. To welcome back its live audience, the UAAP treated fans with an action-packed quadruple header on Tuesday. In the first game, the De La Salle Green Archers came out on top against the UST Growling Tigers, 75-66. Meanwhile, the UP Fighting Maroons escapes with a 73-71 victory over the Adamson Soaring Falcons. For the third game of the day, the FEU Tamaraos bounced back with a dominating win over the UE Red Warriors, 88-74. And for the final game, the Ateneo Blue Eagles look to continue their dominant run as they face the NU Bulldogs. Also on the UAAP, the head coach of the University of the East Red Warriors, Jack Santiago, was given a 2-game suspension for supposedly instructing players to harm their opponent, fighting Maroon Richie Rivero during a game. The UAAP says Santiago was heard telling players to deliberately harm Rivero. Season 84 basketball commissioner Tonichi Pujante says the conduct is unbecoming of a head coach and that violence is never an option. Pujante initially slapped a 3-game suspension on Coach Santiago but was downgraded following an appeal from the UE mentor. Time for another quick break. When we return. The Quezon City Prosecutor's Office slapped a 72,000 peso fine against a Grab driver who threatened presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. online. Meanwhile, less than 10% of Filipino kids aged 10 and below can read and understand simple texts. The Philippines now has one of the worst cases of learning poverty in the region. And taking the bar for a second time becomes a hot topic online after a known Duterte supporter compared others to Inday Sara, who passed the bar on her first take. These big stories after the break.
Still watching The Big Story, I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. Quezon City prosecutors are set to file grave threat charges against a Grab driver who allegedly threatened to shoot presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr.
But according to the rider's family, this was a case of mistaken identity. Camille Samonte with the details.
Quezon City prosecutors have indicted for grave threats a delivery rider for supposedly making online threats to harm presidential candidate Ferdinand Marcos Jr. The suspect, Michael Go, was arrested on Friday and is now currently under detention. The Marcos camp had earlier lodged a complaint following a tweet from Go with Twitter handle activist blogger threatening to shoot Marcos Jr. Go turned himself over to the police, denying the allegation, adding that the Twitter account does not belong to him. The Grab driver, however, was detained and subjected to inquest proceedings. But was this a case of mistaken identity? His family believes so.
Wala po siyang Twitter account?
Wala po siyang Twitter account at hindi po siya marunong gumamit nun. Facebook lang.
Sana po matulungan nyo kami na magkaroon ng tamang investigasyon. Sana po matulungan nyo po kami, lalong-lalo na yung pinsan kong si Michael Go na nakakulong po ngayon sa Camp Karingal CIDU, na mabigyan po ng tamang hustisya. Na biktima lang po yung pinsan ko rito.
Go's family also called out the real Michael Go to turn himself in so that Go's name will be cleared. The Marcos Jr. camp, meanwhile, has yet to issue a statement on the matter. For News 5, Camille Samonte, We Are One News.
A study by the World Bank and United Nations Children's Fund shows the Philippines falling behind when it comes to education, as only 10% of 10-year-olds in the Philippines can read and understand simple text. Greg Gregorio gives us the story.
With 70 weeks of school closures due to the pandemic, one of the longest in the world, the Philippines resorted to distance learning to educate the youth. But is it effective? In a joint study by UNICEF, UNESCO and the World Bank, the Philippines ranked high in learning poverty, meaning out of those 10 years and younger, only 10% can read and understand simple text. This is one of the lowest in Southeast Asia. A principal from one of the local schools admits that school closures greatly affected the quality of education in the country.
Nagkaroon din ng problema dahil kadalasan sa bahay sila sumasagot. Madalas tinutulungan sila ng mga magulang imbis na sila ang tunay na sasagot sa mga activities, no?
Sir Liu added that there are 3 aspects that hinder a kid's ability to focus on their studies.
May kakulangan sila sa nutrition, kanilang kinakain, na kung saan hindi sapat para makatulong sa pagbibigay ng enerhiya para sa kanilang katawan. At kapag gutom ang bata, hindi nakakapag-isip ng maigi. Pangalawa, may mga magulang din na hindi nakapag-aral na kung saan imbis na tulungan nila ang kanilang bata, sila mismo ay hindi marunong magbasa. May mga bagay din na kung saan ang mga bata may kakulangan sa aklat, may kakulangan sa mga learning materials.
With this, they have launched remedial classes, not only for students, but for parents as well. Some parents, however, still prefer to send their kids to school.
Pero mas gusto pa rin na namin ng face-to-face. Ito pa rin kasi yung nakakausap ng bata yung teacher, mas napapaliwanag nila ng maayos yung mga dapat gawin.
As the country eases its restrictions, face-to-face classes are already back in some schools. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
No lawyer hierarchy. That's what Filipino attorneys are saying to critics of bar exam retakers.
This comes after attorney Bruce Rivera, a known supporter of the Dutertes, posted that Inday Sara passed the bar exam on her first take. Rivera then quipped, why not ask others as to how many times they took the bar? Several lawyers have banded together online to defend retakers from criticism. In a tweet, attorney and Professor Gideon Peña pointed out that there is no difference between lawyers who passed on their first try and those who did not. Associate Justice and former bar chairperson Marvic Leonen also echoed Peña's tweet.
Some netizens also aired their sentiments. One said that examinees go through a lot already just to take and pass their exams. The 2020-2021 bar exam results will be released on April 12.
Coming from a family of lawyers, what do you think about this?
No, totoo naman, di ba? Parang, in fact, I know a lot of people who've taken the bar twice. May mga kilala pa ako na 3 times nag-take. At the end of the day, maging abogado ka muna, di ba? Practice and show us yung galing mo at more importantly, yung puso mo, di ba?
Tsaka yung lakas ng loob to retake it or in your second, third, or fourth try. I think we have to commend them for that. And I also saw a tweet about this saying hindi nasusukat ng bar exam yung integrity at prinsipyo ng lawyer.
If I'm not mistaken, they're also going to stop this practice of even releasing the top 10 bar takers. Precisely because it puts a wrong emphasis. I mean, what do we care kung number 1 ka? Like I said, mag-practice ka muna, serve the people, do your job well, and then we measure how good you are later on in life.
Well, we heard it from somebody who comes from a family of lawyers.
Who's not a lawyer.
That wraps up today's Big Story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.